The Montgomery College Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program is a unique collaboration between the Paul Peck Humanities Institute and Smithsonian's Office of Educational Technology. This unique professional opportunity encourages community college faculty to teach with the Smithsonian. Dr. Katya Salmi is a public sociologist with a focus on race, gender, and racialization, as well as structural issues relating to inequality, discrimination, and social justice. She currently serves on the President's Advisory Committee on Equity and Inclusion at MC. Prior to joining Montgomery College, she was a fellow at Human Rights Watch, leading research on migration. She continues to work with local and international nonprofit organizations on equity issues. Much of Dr. Salmi's work in and out of the classroom is centered around questions of equity and equal access to services, employment, and higher education.
I'm gonna share my experience taking my students to the National Museum of the American Indian. So I implemented the Smithsonian project in my class, SOK 233, which is Race and Ethnic Relations. And as a class, we decided to go on October 9th, which turned out to be Indigenous Peoples Day. So we found that really fortuitous, and it was a really wonderful experience. The class was actually a Zoom class, so it was a little bit awkward at first because none of us had ever interacted with each other in person. And I found it quite funny when I arrived to the museum. We were set to meet out front, and everybody was just sitting 3 meters away from each other, not interacting until we all got there. But we had a great visit, and prior to the visit, we did some preparation, which involved reviewing 2 or 3 articles. They had a choice of what to read, but they had to read at least one article that out of the list that I provided for them. And I also included a podcast, and the articles and resources focused on decolonizing museums and kind of recent efforts to challenge the traditional approach to museums and to think about museums in a different light. And so from this prism of decolonizing museums, we went to the visit with this idea already in mind that we were going to be thinking about the role of museums as agents of change, and with a particular focus on what role museums can play to challenge or support ideas around racism, mainstream ideas around race. And I picked this museum, the National Museum of the American Indian, because a lot of my students were expressing to me at the beginning of the semester, and that's one of the things that's quite special, even though it's a bit nerve-wracking about the fellowship, is that you don't need to have everything set in stone before you begin the course. And so there's flexibility, and you can talk about it with your cohort and with your wonderful coordinators and figure out what works. And so I noticed that my students in my class last semester didn't seem to know very much at all about Indigenous people. And some of them were international students, and so had this idea about just things that they had seen in cartoons, but they were not really familiar with, including those who grew up here and went to school here, weren't really familiar with the details of the history. And so before the visit, they did their prep work, and I asked them, and I provided some printed versions as well. So I asked them to have this available. I had them think about these questions during their visit. So they had access to the questions prior to the visit, and they were also referring to these questions at the visit, so that they were able to be independent from me during the visit, but also be thinking about some of the things that I wanted them to be thinking about, working towards the assignments that they would have to do. So I saw them regularly referring to this question sheet. So when we were not all together as a group talking about a particular piece or element of the exhibit, I could see them connecting with these questions and having them seem to be handy for them. So the exhibit was huge, but a lot of it is focused on imageries. We went to the Americans exhibit at the National American Indian Museum. Sorry, I didn't specify that earlier. And the Americans exhibit features imageries, common imageries that have been perpetuated in movies and TV shows and advertisements and so on, and even products, consumer products, weapons that really present stereotypical versions of and images of indigenous people in the United States. And but what the exhibit also does is focus on three key elements of history. One of them was on Pocahontas. One of them was on the Trail of Tears. Another one was about a big battle. And these detailed rooms break away from the stereotypes and try to help the visitors go beyond stereotypical imageries of the exhibit. But because artifacts were so important in this main, big, amazing realm of the exhibit, I wanted students to pick an artifact that resonated with them and think about how artifacts can reflect the idea of race and in this particular assignment, like on what it means to be American and connect with different artifacts. And so one of the outputs was for students to contrast, like find one artifact from the museum visit itself and then an artifact of their choice from another museum or from their everyday life that had them reflect on the concept of American and the racialization of the concept of American. And they were also provided with some guiding questions that would help them think about the objects that they were focusing on in their analyses. And so these are just two examples of how the Padlets turned out. Students really had some great objects that they focused on and did a really amazing job of connecting them with their ideas, their understanding of American. And you could see by the time they submitted this assignment, they really were engaging so nicely with the concepts that they learned in the course that they were able to apply that almost retroactively to the artifacts that they had chosen at the museum. In terms of the assignment, in addition to the Padlet that I just shared, the big output was an essay, right, a writing assignment where students had to do two main things. On the first hand was to explore further this idea of American as a racialized identity, and they did so by contrasting the experiences of Native Americans with any other group of their choice in the United States. So students chose African Americans or Latinos or Arab Americans. There was a variety of focus from the students here. And there was a big reflection component where the students in this class were reflecting on the roles of museums and engaging with that wider kind of cultural institution and influence. And I think this part helped them make those connections between our course and what we learned in the course, the museum visit, and how cultural institutions like museums do contribute and can help in decolonizing minds around the impact of racism and stereotypes. And finally, like one last thing that I thought was quite helpful at the museum is that they have this room with postcards where you can share your thoughts. And I was able to ask the students to fill up a postcard and give it to me, and kind of thinking about reflecting on the spot about what they learned. And so considering many of my students did not fill out the survey at the end of the assignment, I still had a quite a few quotes from students, and it was a really touching moment where we were able. I got some really kind of raw reactions to the the visit. So it was really a great experience, and thank you so much, Denise and Mimi, and to my cohort for being so supportive in this whole process.
Thank you, Katya. Katya, we have a couple minutes. Do you want to read a little bit of those quotes? Because it may be hard for people to read the handwriting on the Zoom
Yeah,
screen.
sure. So the first one was, "This trip has been such a great adventure for me. I enjoyed and learned a lot about the Native Americans culture. There were a lot um, of information that I didn't even know." And this other student said, "When I took a DNA test on 23andMe, I saw that I had a small percentage of Native American. It was really amazing, and perhaps, um, well, I can't read everything, sorry, to discover about Native Americans." And then I disappeared. And after viewing exhibits, I learned that there is more Native um, to be found than meets the eye. So there's more about Native history to be found that meets the eye. And it is truly amazing for history, how far history has come. So I found that it's more intense in the history of Natives, but if I do have DNA from a Native American, I'd be proud.